Welcome back, everybody, to part two in this series in understanding and dealing with the challenges facing humanity in the 21st century. In part one of this presentation, we talked about the challenges facing us, and we'll put a link to that presentation on the bottom of this video. So if you haven't seen it, you can go back and perhaps you might want to start with that. So now let's talk about the possible scenarios that might play out as a result of how we deal with or ignore the challenges that we outlined before. In order to do that, let me share out my desktop screen again so we can continue on with part two. Okay, so here we go. Um, Four scenarios for humanity's future. Okay, so when we look at all the challenges we face that we discussed in the last section, uh, this convergence is clearly unprecedented in all of human history. As I mentioned before, evolutionary changes have always happened over geological timeframes, with life taking tens of thousands of years for adaptations to occur. Life cannot adapt to the massive changes that are now underway in such a short period of time, literally within one human's lifespan of, let's say, 80 years. And the danger that we face is with the positive feedback loops, the change will speed up and will follow an exponential growth curve. By the time you realize how serious the problem is, there is very little time to course correct. That's one of the problems with exponential growth. I think I mentioned in the last video that you might want to check out my other video on exponential growth, what it is and why it's so dangerous. Okay, so let's see what the implications for all these challenges mean. I mentioned a couple of them in the last video. We talked about a warming planet means less snow and ice on mountaintops, which are reservoirs for rivers and streams. Um, when you have more heat in the atmosphere, you have warmer oceans, less ice, warming sea level, damaged corals, which is the nursery for many types of fish species. Okay, you have the potential for stronger storms and hurricanes, more droughts and wildfires, and so on. So you have all these interactive components going on. I think I already mentioned enough about this. I'm not going to go into any more detail right now on these. Let's talk about exponential growth and why it is so dangerous. Okay. I mentioned in the last talk about positive feedback loop, where a change in the system creates a bigger change in the system over time. Think about your thermostat again, where you have the heat and cold wires uh, correctly or incorrectly wired. And when you think you have the heat on, it's actually cooling and vice versa. So in such a scenario in your house in the wintertime, the house would actually get colder and colder because the air conditioner would come on instead of the heat. That is an example of positive feedback where a change in one direction tends to exacerbate and make worse the change in that same direction. And it's things tend to start off very slowly with exponential growth. As you can see for this curve, it takes a long time before you can really see the effects of positive feedback. But once it occurs, when you get to this bend in the curve, the effects become much more pronounced. Uh, Climate extremes, heat waves, crop failures, river floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires, and droughts. We all talked about these before. They'll all increase in frequency and intensity as you get to the bend in the curve. And often the change is very rapid and not a whole lot of time to react. So just to give you an example, here's a chart showing the global temperature on the planet from average global temperature from 1880 through 2000 or so. Um, If you look on there, there's actually two graphs. The blue line reflects the global temperature averages, and these are just seasonal fluctuations, but clearly you can see that the overall trend is up on global temperature. And it's totally correlated with the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere from burning carbon dioxide. Um, you may not be aware, but an average vehicle that gets 22 miles per gallon a year and drives an average of 15,000 miles a year um, will produce approximately 4 metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And if you multiply that by, there's almost 300 million vehicles just within the United States. So let's say it's closer to well over a billion, and you multiply that by 4 metric tons per vehicle. You can see that we're putting a huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year. And on top of that, you also have planes, trains, and other devices, electric generating facilities, and who knows what else that uses fossil fuels. By the way, as of 2024, my understanding is that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in terms of parts per million is almost 425 parts per million now. We are clearly way beyond the bend in the curve and the implications for humanity. Okay, so given what's going on, not only with the climate, but all the other challenges we face, which scenario is most, future scenario is most likely? We would all like to see an optimistic future where we have green cities and everybody has a very high standard of living, educational opportunities abound, and there's compassion and caring for our neighbors and people that we live with on one extreme. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet. But what has happened? Well, if you read the newspapers or watch the news media at all, you know there are forest fires occurring with increasing frequency. I just happened to read a news article yesterday. I live in South Florida, and parts of um, the the Florida Keys, stretching south from Miami, well out into the Gulf. Uh, the roads are closed. Nobody can get in or out because there's a forest fire down there that is actually preventing traffic from moving through the area. Of course, this is happening all over the country now with increasing frequency. Uh, Pandemics. We talked about COVID pandemic and the follow-ons and bird flu and all these other things that are happening. And you know, with the population as large as it is and people packed into high density areas, and us destroying more of the rainforest and exotic places where people never went to before, the increase likelihood of pandemics are more of a possibility, not to mention escapes from future laboratories by inadequate safety measures. Okay, we have all heard about the droughts that are occurring around the world. Some of them are very severe, and it's affecting the ability of farmers to produce crops. If it isn't a drought, we hear about floods. And sometimes we hear about both in the same geographic areas, but at different times of the year. First, we have floods in the spring, and then the rains seem to go away, and then we are followed by droughts, which gives the farmers very little chance to put the crops in the ground and see them rise to maturity over time. Of course, hurricanes are increasing in frequency and severity. We all know about that. And it's not just Florida anymore. The effects of hurricanes extend far inland now as North Carolina, and the impact of flooding because of the huge amounts of moisture in the atmosphere as a result of the hurricane. And of course, tornadoes, although Oklahoma was the tornado capital of the world, it is now moving eastward as the climate patterns shift and moisture patterns shift. It's not just Oklahoma anymore that is now experiencing large numbers of tornadoes. And worst case scenario, let's hope this one never plays out for sure, a nuclear holocaust. Every single one of these pictures, except the top left, has already happened. and is happening with increasing frequency. And it's not just happening in certain remote geographic areas, it's happening all over the place. All you have to do is read beyond the headlines of the newspapers or news articles or news media to find out where they're happening. Hardly a week goes by where you don't hear about some occurrence like this. So, um, because not only of climate impacts and all the other interacting challenges that we face, modern civilization is vulnerable in ways that are never before seen throughout all of human history or history of the planet. For that matter. As an example, let's consider the modern society's dependency on our energy grid. And here there's plenty of worry about. This is not speculation. This has already happened, although the effects were regional. I personally lived through the great blackout of the Northeast in the 1970s, which took out a good part of Northeast United States and Canada as well, as a result of an overloaded generator in the grid. Okay, so whether it's because of an EMP pulse, an electromagnetic pulse produced by an atomic weapon high in the atmosphere, a solar coronal mass ejection event, or other stellar outbursts like a relatively nearby star going supernova, or a massive cyber attack on our energy grid, uh, or a widespread technology failure. Um, for example, the one that happened in Spain and Portugal in the last week or so, or one due to extended heating or cooling, all could take out the grid. And what would be the impact if this outage was widespread and long term? Well, in the case of the top three EMP pulses, CMEs, or mass cyber attacks, industrial transformers that control the grid could be wiped out. Now, these transformers are built to order. They generally have a lead time of a year or two. And by the way, most of them are built in China right now, which the last time I checked, I didn't think we had such friendly relationships with at the moment. So, if we lost the grid, there'd be no internet, no cell phones, no point of sale terminals, which means no credit cards, no credit card transactions, no refrigeration, whether it's in a supermarket or in your home, no lights in your home, no traffic lights, no elevators, you name it. Uh, Most of the conveniences that we expect in modern society would no longer be there. So in 12 hours, hospitals and gas stations and some grocery stores that have backup generators installed would start running out of fuel. Okay, and there'd probably be no way to get them replaced. In 24 hours, people in hospitals that are dependent upon machines, those that manage to survive for the first 24 hours, would start dying, and that would certainly create widespread panic. Within 48 hours, the grocery stores, the homes would start running out of fresh water and food because don't forget, the pumps that deliver water to our house also run on electricity and they wouldn't be working either. Within 72 hours, civilization itself would be on the brink of collapse. So it doesn't take much, and this is not outside the realm of possibility. It is certainly plausible that this could happen. So let's talk about something that a group of concerned scientists established after the atomic bomb that was developed to end World War II. In 1947, a consortium of atomic scientists led by Oppenheimer created the metaphor called the doomsday clock. It was not a prediction. It was about possible threats to humanity from unchecked scientific and technological advances. And it's been updated every year since. Midnight is when the proverbial crap hits the fan. And and they every year they estimated how close we'd be coming to that point in time. So here's a quote from what they published in this year's bulletin. In 2025, humanity edged over closer to catastrophe, ever closer to catastrophe. Trends that have deeply concerned science and security and the security board continued. And despite unmistakable signs of danger, national leaders and their societies have failed to do what is needed to change course. So, as of January 28th, 2025, the doomsday clock set by the Society for Atomic Scientists is now set to 89 seconds to midnight, meaning that we are very close to a catastrophic event that could really have a major impact on society. So, can this momentum be reversed? All these challenges that we face, can we reduce them or lessen the impact? Well, first, let's consider the three classes of people that make up society. There are those, including the people who are probably watching this video, who know we're in trouble. Some of you may be in despair, thinking it's already too late. Some of you may not know where to begin, and there are some of you who want an all hands on deck approach, perhaps like what we did during the Manhattan Project in World War II, where the United States created the atomic bomb by throwing huge amounts of resources at scientists to develop the weapon to end the war once and for all. So the second category of people are those that are within, maintain the power and control in the current uh, environment. If they don't have the power and control directly, they certainly have a lot of influence, like these millionaires and billionaires who invest hundreds of thousands, if not millions more, in political campaigns so they get the bills passed that are desirable for whatever the objectives are that they want. So all these people who have a vested interest want to keep things as they are. They don't want the change for whatever reason. Maybe a few of them are compassionate and recognize what's going on. And if for no other reason than for their future descendants, they want to see a better world. But those are few and far between in this category of people. And then there's the third category, people who just don't care. They're not paying attention, for they won't be around to see the suffering, or they're just trying to survive, put food on the table, pay the month's rent, etc., keep their kids in school, buy clothing, or whatever they need to do just to stay alive. Um, there's a group in this category that just don't believe it, or just don't care what's happening. Um, and of course, some of these people are also being misled by disinformation campaigns. And if you don't believe in disinformation campaigns is rampant, just consider the fact that big oil has known since the 1970s what it was doing to the atmosphere in terms of global warming. This came out relatively recently in a suit that was filed on behalf of citizens in a number of states. So they've known about it. Their scientists knew about it. They suppressed the information they had for almost 60 years. This has happened in so many occasions. Cigarettes don't cause cancer, is another example. Or how about leaded gasoline? Oh, sure, you can inhale the fumes from the exhaust from a car that's burning gasoline. No problem whatsoever. Things are going to be fine. Why can't you buy leaded gasoline anymore? Well, it's now known that the lead, is a pollutant that's toxic to human beings. So those are just a few examples. There are many more I can give, but I think you get the point. So what are the scenarios that are likely to play out this century across the geographic areas of the world? Okay. Are we going to have a rosy future where humanity avoids collapse and the standard of living continues to increase? Are we going to have a partial collapse followed by a rebound where people wake up and recognizing that Earth's ecosystem is what we evolved out of and we needed to survive, and they develop a higher level of consciousness and compassion for not only other humans, but all living creatures that inhabit our planet. The third scenario is civilization collapse with pockets of it surviving, but not widespread survival. And of course, the fourth possibility, which is the most devastating for the planet, or living creatures on the planet, is extinction itself. So, do we go the way of the dinosaurs? So, let's take a look at each of these scenarios and see what the impacts will be and the likelihood of their occurrence. So, scenario number one, humanity wakes up. This is collapse avoidance. We respond with sufficient urgency and resources, perhaps Manhattan-style program around the world that I mentioned earlier, to try to reverse the situation that we're now facing, or situations, I should say. Uh, in the process, you can't stop an aircraft carrier immediately. It takes several miles when it's running at flank speed until it comes to a stop. Well, the same thing is true with the momentum caused by all these challenges that we currently face. So there will be some downward spiral continuing in the environment and with civilization for a while until we can recover. Probably resource wars will become more common as we encounter increasing scarcity. Simple things like iron, copper, and even sand for cement. And by the way, sand is also used in semiconductor devices, what makes up your smartphone and your computers and things like that. So, with this scenario, there will be some suffering and reduction in the standard of living. Uh, there will be some scarcity, but there will probably be high-tech enclaves that will survive, and probably industrial and informational society will continue as before, but with some minor suffering. Okay, scenario number two is a little bit more pessimistic. We have a partial collapse of civilization followed by a rebound. Society will not wake up in time. There'll be more and more social turbulence, civil unrest, and scarcity encountered. Civilization will fragment between the haves and the have-not. There will be a partial environmental collapse, and some regions may become climate resilient, the so-called eco-enclaves, particularly northern climates that won't feel the effects of heat waves as much as the equatorial regions. Um, Probably the established institutions, linear governments, and some big businesses will not be as effective at mitigating some of the effects of the challenges we face. We'll see the rise of more authoritarian regimes as people demand action from their governments. And of course, authoritarians, are more almost always out for themselves and not for the common good. So, a moderate to a high degree of suffering, especially in poorer regions of the globe. Uh, and industrial informational society will probably suffer a long, slow decline, more pronounced in poorer areas of the globe. And it may even get so bad that in some areas there will be post-industrial feudal systems arising from the dust, literal dust that will occur. So those hopefully that will survive will grow in wisdom from the failures that we experience. Okay, scenario number three. There will be general collapse with pockets of survival. Um, Society will ignore the crisis until it's too late to really reverse it. Civilization as we know it, with all our technology and all our conveniences, will collapse. There'll be widespread violences and civil unrest as people try to find ways to survive and will do anything to achieve that. Um, There'll probably be a loss of technological, cultural advantages and other knowledge and information gained through the last several hundred years. There will be high degrees of suffering, if not outright death, and mass migrations of people from areas that are suffering continual droughts or flooding or hurricanes or whatever. No country boundaries will keep people out from a place that allows them to barely survive. They will find ways to migrate to uh, countries or geographic regions that are more suitable to a decent life. There'll be extensive environmental collapse and a rapid decline to localized feudalism, just like there was in the Middle Ages in Europe. And there'll be large-scale species extinction with pockets of humanity surviving. And those that do survive will live in mostly pre-industrial societies, back to what living was like in the late 1700s. So scenario number 4, which is the worst case scenario, total collapse and extinction. Civilization will descend into chaos. There'll be widespread environmental collapse, catastrophic destruction around the planet, extensive suffering and death, rapid decline to extinctions for both humans and non-humans alike. The only good news in this scenario is that the Earth will survive, although it may take 1,000,000 years for it to regenerate and become the garden planet that it once was. So here's the summary of the 4 scenarios that I just went over. Collapse is avoided, but I must say, and many people would agree with me, that we are very close to being too late to avoid this scenario. Scenario number 2, partial collapse followed by a rebound. The window is closing. If we don't take action within the next few years, certainly by 2030, that window is likely to close. Scenario number 3, collapse with pockets of survival. This is a likely possibility that will increase with time. And scenario number 4, total collapse and extinction. Again, the longer we wait, the more likely it will be. It is also possible that several of these scenarios for humanity's future will play out in the next few decades based on geographic areas of the wealth of individual nations. Certainly, all 4 or one of the 4 will play out in the 21st century. And the longer humanity waits in taking serious mitigating actions, and I'm talking about massive actions like Manhattan Project style actions, the more likely scenarios 3 and 4 become. So again, this chart is really key. As time goes up, we go from a low risk environment number 1. As time continually marches on, the risk increases as we go from scenario 1 to scenario 4. That is the key takeaway of this slide. Okay, final thoughts. The projections in this presentation are way too pessimistic. We can be complacent, we can take a wait and see attitude, and we can act at some point in the future. I'm here to tell you that that is not a viable option. Job One for Humanity recently published a scenario, and you can see the URL on the bottom of this slide, that indicates that if things go as they are headed without massive action, 50% of humanity could be wiped out by 2050. Not a very pleasant thought. If you'd like to learn more about their predictions and the evidence to support it, I suggest you write down this URL and take a look at their website. Okay, Second scenario, or the second possibility is our projections are reasonably accurate. Some say we have a few decades to course correct. Let's hope that's the case. It's very difficult in a chaotic system to know exactly when things will play out. Others say that we may only have a few years, like till 2030. And again, the actual time remaining is impossible to predict. Uh, we buy insurance not because we think our house will burn down, but if for the unlikely event that it does occur, we'll have the peace of mind knowing that we can rebuild. Given these scenarios, all but the first one, which is the most unlikely one at this point in time, there probably will be a lot of suffering in the future and it will affect many people alive on planet Earth. If now is not the time to demand action by our leaders, both public and private, government and non-government, we will not have any hope of recovery, and extinction will be the most likely possibility, not just for humans, but for most life on Earth, and that will become a real possibility. Positive feedback loops mean exponential change. And by the time you realize what is happening, there is usually very little time to change course. This is no time for complacency. Now is the time for action. Let's hope that my projections are way too pessimistic, and let's hope that we should be more optimistic about the future. One thing I know for sure, there is no plan B. There are no other Earths in the solar system that are garden planets where life could survive. And even if there were, we do not have the technology to move hardly any people at all to such another possibility. So we're stuck with planet Earth for the foreseeable future. So what I'd like to leave you with, no matter what people tell you and what people say, nature will always have the last word on what ultimately happens, regardless of the beliefs, opinions of our leaders, politicians, or anybody else. We buy insurance for a reason, not because we expect something to happen, but just in case it does, we protect ourselves from the unlikely event. Well, we're facing a lot of events that are becoming less and less unlikely all the time. As I said before, now is the time to act. Demand our leaders take action. Do whatever is necessary to spread the word. Our future and our children's future and their children's future are all at stake. So thank you very much. I appreciate the time. There's lots of information that you can find on our website, grokingwholeness.info, that will hopefully be helpful to give you more information on how to protect yourself and what you can do for the future, and also in demanding action of some of our leaders. So we will be producing more videos on similar subjects in the future, but I hope I've given you some things to think about. And please, I know it's hard not to be negative, but the situation is very serious. We can't afford to be optimistic or pie in the sky about this one. There's too much at stake. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you on the next video.